Hello, this is Dale. I'm joined by Mike. Hello, Mike.
How you doing?
Hi. Well, I'm really looking forward to tonight's show. We've been talking a lot about assumptions and the truth and what is reality. It's going to be much more interesting than that sounds. One of the questions is the crime rate actually going down in Josephine County? See, I'm even reluctant to pose the question because I'm one of those people that sees some logic to the idea that the crime rate's probably going up. But is it possible that the crime rate's actually going down?
It
And what
seems
proof?
counterintuitive.
It does, it does.
Uh,
When Cheryl Walker says to you, well, economic conditions are getting so much better in Josephine County, well, then she has to say, don't look at the boarded up buildings in downtown Grass Pass. What's the matter with you? That's a lie. That's not possible. That's actually what you're looking at. What you're looking at is prosperity.
yes,
Um,
yes. Depends
uh,
on your definition.
it does depend. And so when the police, I kind of like these guys. I kind of like the police chief, and I kind of like our new sheriff. And so when they say, well, Dale, no, the statistics show the crime's going down, but take our word for it, it's skyrocketing. Um, I see that.
Well, and they say that to some degree. However, what they say that in the interview we had last Tuesday, that property crime, violent crime is coming down nationwide. It has been over the last 25, 30 years, but that in the city of Grants Pass, property crime, and I think he even alluded that even in the county, that property crime was embarrassingly high, I think he said. And
Going through the roof. I've heard him say that before, too.
yes, and so, but the numbers with the latest stats that we have don't show that. And so there's this thing that now, in order to believe one side or the other, you have to make a certain leap of faith, at least to one side. You have to go with your feelings, and you have to presume that people are not reporting crime, and that's why the numbers don't show a spike in crime. So you either do that or you go with the existing numbers that we have and you accept them at face value.
Well, no, wait a minute. Why are we accepting anything at face value? We're talking with government people. I am not one of those people who thinks that government's always lying to me. I am one of those people who believes that we should be the government. I don't think that we often are, but we should be the government. And I don't want to believe that Art Harvey is going to miscount the votes. He's the county clerk. I don't want to believe that everybody in county government is doing nothing but lying to us at all times. I don't want to believe that.
Yeah, I don't either. However, I'm one of these guys that I think in the cases where where we as the people are not the government, and that's kind of a gray area. We have to define that a little bit better. But in those cases, I think they are mostly lying to us, and we don't have good data. The thing is that perhaps their own selfish motives get in the way of telling the truth, because you know what? In their minds, the truth is what they have deemed is good for you. In other words, listen, I'm going to fudge the numbers a little bit, but I'm doing it for you. You don't know what's good for you, so what I have to do is I have to lie to you about these numbers and get you to pass this levy so that we can have good public safety for the community. And I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that for your benefit, for your
All right,
sake.
now how do we know that anybody's lying to us at all? I give you a very simple example from the Internal Services Fund, ISF. Yes, that thing again. Okay, one, We know that the county government is telling us it's 10%. 10% is taken off the top, is kindly taken off the top, or skimmed off the top, whatever words you want to use, and it's used for a number of different things, which we'll talk about later. Now, just recently, with this crowd, that is, with this group of dedicated citizens, whatever you want to call them, this gang, they're saying, no, 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 wait, it's not 10%, it's 0%. No. Oh, it's not 10% or 0%, it's 1/2 of 1%. No. Oh, it's not neither one of those. Why, once you take 10% out of the sheriff's budget, we're going to put 15% back in. No. Now, wait a minute. Those are things that we've been told just this year. Now, if that's the case, somebody's not telling the truth. And
Right.
when you get that many people in a group that seem to be willing to tell you anything to get you to vote for it, I automatically go, now, wait a minute.
Right. You know, and I kind of feel bad. I don't want to come off hyperbolic, like somehow I believe, as you said, that everybody in government is lying to me all the time, and but you do kind of you have to look at, and it's funny because this whole thing in the examination of local government has been a growth of learning one little teeny piece of information after another that adds up to, oh my God.
Yes.
And you know, we're starting to have this epiphany because we're drilling down into the minutia of this crime situation now. We have been here for about the last month and a half.
But why do we have to do that? How come we've got to be the ones that go to the state police and to the FBI to get the actual numbers? Wait a minute. Is it possible that it's to someone's benefit that we don't all know these numbers?
Well, yes, I think that's why we don't know these numbers, is because that doesn't listen. There's a narrative, you know, boy, what's the other right way of putting that? I mean, the story that goes along with, you know, setting the table for passing the levy. You have to say certain things. You can't if something conflicts with that objective.
Yes.
You have to leave it out of the narrative.
You have to skip over that part.
You got to skip over it, and so we're in our desire to fully understand this. And listen, people assign motives to us. Having little smash ups on social media here with people that don't, you know, I'm just laying out the story as we know it right now. And you know, some people just come unglued if you you know, even postulate the idea that somehow crime is going down. They're like, oh my God, their brain explodes. Oh no,
right.
It couldn't possibly be.
Well, I've come close to that myself because I kind of bought, not entirely, but I kind of bought into that. So actually, I'm more of a representative of the other side on this. But let me give you an example of when people don't want to hear it. Okay, this is going back a little bit, but Dave Toller was a commissioner. And Dave Toller would get together with groups, especially in the Illinois Valley, and he'd have a few tokes and etc., and he would pal around with them, and they were happy to see him. Hey, Dave, yeah. You know, and Dave Toller, the impression that they had of him out in Cave Junction, Illinois Valley, is he's a tireless champion for green issues, for the environment. He was out there working his heart out to make sure that things happen for the county, that we're going to save the trees and save the animals and the spotted owl and etc. They really, really knew that. They knew that about Dave. Mm-hmm. So I went to a couple of meetings and I said, you know, I go to all these meetings. I'm at all the meetings. And I've never heard Dave in a vote, if he's representing you, where he said, you know, I'm going to, where in any way he was voting for environmental issues that matched your perception. Oh, how can you possibly, we all know that about him. I said, okay, let me ask you this question. And this is when it got tough on them. They were not happy. I said, do you think, at the moment Dwight Ellis was chair, do you think that Dwight Ellis is an environmentalist? Absolutely not. He's exactly the opposite way. You know, how could you even say that? Even use those two words in the same sentence? I said, okay, great. Why is it then that Dave Toller, great environmentalist, and Dwight Ellis, who would never be mistaken for an environmentalist, always vote the same?
Yeah.
Now, wait. They hated this. They hooted me out of, you never be allowed back. Hey, no, wait a minute. Just think about it for a second. I understand that this goes against your thinking. The same thing for me, and a decreasing crime rate? Really? Come on. But if you look at the fact, let me give you another example. Cassinelli. Why, Sandy Cassinelli always votes no. Well, we got to get her out of there because she's an idiot. No, she wasn't. She may not be able to say things always without going, okay, it's a problem that she's had for a long time. But she was usually, and I'm there, the only person who had read any of these things, and she was telling the others what it said, and they made some of their decisions based on the fact that she had actually read it. They were a little lazy, and they didn't feel like reading it. But the other thing is, we went back and did a scientific examination of how many times she voted no. 10%. No, wait a minute. That's not possible. She's obviously, everybody knew, it's in the newspaper, Cassinelli. So your numbers have got to be wrong, Dale. No, my numbers weren't wrong. 10% of the time she voted no. 90% of the time, Cassinelli voted yes. So now, wait a minute. I realize that may challenge you a little bit out in the audience, but are some of the things that you know actually not at all true?
Yes, yes, and the thing is that, and this goes back to the narrative that we were talking about. They established a narrative about Sandy Cassinelli because the objective was to boot her out of office. So you had to sell this idea about Sandy Cassinelli, and it had a nice little, charming little ring to it. And so they push it and push it and push it, and pretty soon that becomes the
accepted fact.
The perception.
Yes.
About Sandy Cassinelli. So we have to be careful. And listen, we got to give a shout out to Bill Hunker here, because Bill Hunker is the one who chased this thing down. He's the one who went after these numbers and compiled the numbers and split up the city and county and all this kind of stuff to make it very understandable for everybody. And so we owe it to him. This is opening up a whole new can of worms.
But you need to ask yourself, you need to, in this case, and in the case with Sandy and with Dave, why would anybody say, I think it's pretty obvious, that's why I'm picking obvious examples, why would Dave Toller be telling them out in the Illinois Valley, I always vote for environmental issues? Yes, you certainly do.
Well, that's a no-brainer.
And why would it be that there were some people who felt that it was necessary to paint Sandy Cassinelli as always saying no? She didn't always say no. Now, you may say she did this and this and this, but the whole thing about her saying no all the time was completely false.
Right. Yeah, but she said no on certain things that they wanted her to say yes on, and so that's why they wanted to railroad her out of town.
And railroad's the right word, because I often use the analogy where we've got these rail cars coming across the border into California and Oregon from Mexico, and they just come straight across. I mean, all this stuff is on board. We don't know what's on there, right? And every once in a while they stop the whole train. Imagine the disruption that causes, stopping the train, and they open up one of the containers and they look inside. And, oh, look, here's arms, and here's drug money, and here's illegal aliens. Okay, go ahead, or whatever. I'm trying to make a small joke out of that. Well, Sandy Cassinelli insisted every once in a while on stopping the whole train. What? You're not going to stop the train? And looking inside. And this drove them crazy.
Yes, let's see what we're passing. And I mean, this demon has reared its ugly head a few times. When here just recently, when they wanted to pass the 7-county IJ, they didn't even want to look at it anymore. They were just going to rubber stamp the thing and move on, and then we would be subject to all kinds of things. Listen, people, what we saved you from. We, myself, Dale, a few friends of ours, we saved your backsides. Boy, that was close.
I didn't even mute him. He muted himself.
Yes.
Do that more often, Mike.
And what, you know why? Because we read it.
Well, and it was so full of errors. It was copied from Jackson County. This thing was so full of errors, it actually said in there in several places, and then Jackson County shall do this. Wait a minute. Not only did they not read it, they copied it so completely. It reminded me when I was at university and some of the students from other countries would go to the internet to copy something and turn it in as their paper. It got so bad that it would say on there, click here for more information on the paper.
Yes, this is why proofreading is so important,
Well, they're not doing that, and this isn't some college paper where what difference does it make? These are people who are spending your money and saying, oh, well, we've got to $50,000 to Mark Van Holly or whatever, but they're not looking at it. And what we're trying to do is not just be negative all the time, but to tell you what the heck's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, so
just a second.
This is why it's important to understand what time the show is on, people. It's getting busy in the Dale newsroom. But no, it's important to understand some of the minutia of what is going through the county commissioner's office, and we are doing our best to keep up with that. And the funny thing is you get the most criticism from the people who know the least about what's going on.
That's right. Actually, we do. Yes, we get criticized a lot from people who aren't at the meetings. I remember, I mentioned this to you before, he's the head of arguably the largest church in our area, Dennis Weber, and he's telling people at the church, the thing about those weekly business sessions, why there's people screaming, there's people that are taking over the thing, there are people that are yelling out expletives. You know what? That's not true. Now, and there were people, I said to him, there are going to be people who believe you because you're head of this church. They're going to believe you, but you don't know, I'm sorry, you don't know what you're saying here because it's just not true.
Yeah. You know what? And if you're going to say stuff like that, you should at least have been there and experienced it, which brings me to the point where, people, we discuss these crime stats, we discuss, other things that are going on, and we get criticized for it, or, we make some noises about some particular thing that's going through the commissioner's office, and then they get on the defensive, and then all of a sudden the protection crew comes in from the Democratic Party or who knows where else, and
Rotary Club,
and they come up and make a few pronouncements about the horrible things that are going on at the weekly business session that they've never experienced before in their life before that day, and then they move out and we never see them again. So delve into the facts a little. Get into the minutia. You kind of owe it to your community. But if you're going to go out there and lobby for the levy, or against it, you still need to know the facts. You need to know the facts.
Well, the hard part, I think, for a lot of people, I remember there was something in the scientific community. Just bear with me for a minute, okay? This is free. You can
God.
This. Come on. There was a big battle for a long time about what causes ulcers. Okay, it sounds like I'm getting off the point, but I'm not. And there were all of these things you could glug this and take that, and there were doctors' prescriptions. It was a big industry dealing with ulcers. And there was this one guy that said, I think maybe it's caused by some kind of other factor. No, it can't possibly be caused by some other factor. Well, I think maybe it is. And this guy was almost drummed out of the science community in America. And this was only about a decade ago. And he said, no, I think it might be something like a virus. No, that's not possible. And he had all of these people and scientists that were backed by what, Gaviscon or whatever, some of these, Pepto, whatever it
Right.
was, backed up to the hilt. There were whole groups of people that were formed to prove this one guy was completely wrong. Well, as it turns out, he was right.
Yes.
Now, I know that goes in.
That's right.
Let me give you another example. I'm just fond of
Oh,
examples. You know this.
and when he's done, I got a couple.
Okay, so Roger Bannister, back before most of us were born, this guy broke.
By the way, before you get onto that,
Yeah.
they discovered really, and not in all cases, but in many cases, ulcers caused by a bacteria, H. pylori.
Okay, that's what I meant to say.
And you get antibiotics, boom, taken care of.
So what happens to all those things that were? Oh, well, now you take them because they make you regular, or I don't know, they help you sleep, or some other thing that they were never intended to do. Perfect example to me is Roger Bannister, which we can read about in history books. Now, this guy broke the 4-minute mile. He broke it. He finally ran a mile in under 4 minutes. Well, the thing is that was supposed to be kind of like the speed of light. You were never supposed to be able to run that fast. So many people have tried and they've not succeeded. So Roger Bannister went out and broke it. Well, within a few weeks, it seemed like everybody and their brother was breaking it. Now, wait a minute. It can't be because of the shoes. It wasn't because of the shoes, or because the wind was always at their back, no matter what direction they're running. No, it's because one guy
started timing themselves.
Well, no, it's not, because they weren't using sundials before. But the thing is that once that guy did it, there's no other explanation. It just was people were holding themselves back.
Right. Yeah.
Really?
Right. Exactly.
Really?
Well, listen. They used to think that if you ever got to 60 miles an hour, you would burst into flames.
Well, yeah. Or that when they first put radios in cars, you had to pull over to the side, does this sound familiar, and listen to your radio, because you would be so absorbed in listening to the radio while you were driving that you couldn't do those two things at once.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Let me see. I can't operate my cell phone at the same time as driving either.
You cannot do it because the statistics show. Okay, so we should be aware and beware of statistics as well. And the latest statistics show us that, nice segue, Dale. Yeah. The latest statistics show us that our crime rate's actually going down, and it has been for a while. Now, take on this thing, please, Mike, about where the people say, oh, well, that, if you only had the latest crime statistics, why, that would show you that that's completely wrong. Go ahead, take that on, Mike.
Okay, well, I did a bunch of thinking about this, and they say, well, I mean, the crime stats, they only come up to 2012. We're waiting right now. It's any day now we're going to get the 2013, 2014 stats. But so they say that, okay, well, I mean, the proof that it isn't true is that there's been no divergence between the two stats. It's usually the difference between them is one is 80%, the other's 20%, roughly.
What two stats? What's the 80 and what's the 20?
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was a big oversight. Between the city crime and the county crime numbers are the numbers in the county. The county has about 20% of the crime in the county, and the city of Grants Pass has the other 80% of it, and it varies some. I mean, it's sometimes less, sometimes more. These numbers slightly vary, but the ratio between them remains the same all the way back. And listen, on the numbers that we have, the last 20 years, crime has come down by 35%, but it comes down with the two lines doing this together. There's no big, it's not bouncing around like that. So if there was a difference between how crime, reported crime and non-reported crime or whatever, I mean, if there was some difference, it would show all the way back there where we had full funding, and everybody knows back during the 90s they had full funding. And I think, what did they say? It was 2003 or 4 we had the peak of funding there at $16.5 million that we had from the federal government. We should have been saving some of this money. Should have been banking some of this money, by the way, when we were getting it.
That's for sure. Well, let me give you another example.
But well, here, hang on a second. So $16.5 million, and at that time we had a fully staffed jail and 100 deputies.
Wow.
And yet now, in some of the latest numbers that we have, the crime isn't any different. It may even be lower, and we almost have a non-existent sheriff's department.
Now, see that now, none of this makes any dang sense to me, which is part of my reluctance to go along with the statistics. But, you know, I can't fight against it because I have no proof, and neither do the pro-levy people, that, I mean, when we talked with the two law enforcement fellows, Landis and Daniel, just the point at which I'd said, now, wait a minute, this perception that you're talking about of evil, it's put out there by people who are promoting the levy, and then suddenly their answer was, well, we're really not here to talk about the levy. You just talked about the levy for the last 22 minutes.
That's right. Yeah, you know what? I mean, that's an interesting thing, but it's difficult when you start talking about real facts as opposed to the abstract, and you know. Luckily, I'm not tempted to get sucked off into that world, because if I can't verify it, well then what am I doing relating it to other people?
Yeah.
You know, I could go and say, well, because this is their theory, is that, well, you know, since the sheriff's department has been mostly defunded and they have a lot less people on duty, then therefore people have decided, well, I'm just not going to call the cops anymore. Okay, well, that's a great theory. What evidence do you have to support that?
Absolutely none. Again, yes. There's no evidence, and what they want you to believe is, well, believe this perception that we have. Now, just one of the reasons why you should wonder, just at least wonder, remember when these guys from Manor Development wanted to build this thing out at the Ivy Airport, and it was fully vetted. They were looked up one way and down the other by the airport manager. Okay, so now I think that his full vetting was when he found out that they were the main contributors to Simon Hare's campaign. And so that's all the vetting you need to do these days. But he said, no, you can take my word for it. I've looked into it. All right, I want to believe that we're going to have hundreds of jobs. I want to believe it. So you already partly got me. You had me at hello, okay? So I wanted to believe that. So we tried to call their headquarters. Nobody ever answers the phone. We had some people that tried to talk to them. They hung up on them. You know, that's a very odd thing to do if you're a legitimate company, just to hang up on people asking you questions. We had, who the heck was it? Was it Jim Frick? Yeah, nice Jim Frick. I may move to Idaho because you're asking questions. What? Now, look, if everything's legitimate, then why can't we get even the most basic confirmation? Now we know, after all that careful vetting, they're not paying anything. They won't allow them on the grounds because they haven't paid anything. And I think it was supposed to be, what was it, $150,000 a month? I don't know what it was, but it was a lot of money. They haven't paid dime one, and it's March, and they were supposed to start January. So when you look back, let's look back at what the sheriff did, the previous sheriff. 2 days after Sandy Cassinelli was in office. This compares with Colleen Roberts that needs 90 days to get going. Okay, get up to speed. Okay, Colleen. 2 days after Sandy was in office, I was sitting there, and Gil Gerbertson walks in. He says, things are they're so bad here with the crime, and it's going crazy, and all, and we need to do, I'm going to need the 4 years of funding that's been said. I need to spend it all in 3 years. What year was that, Mike Jones?
January of 2009. And by the way, if you look at the numbers from 2009 through 2012, very low crime, getting lower all the time. in both the city and
you
the
can be
county.
personally criticized, Mike Jones, for not
Okay.
having the numbers for 2013, 2014. But all we need to do is just shift it back just a little bit and say, well, what were the numbers between 2009 and 2012? We have those numbers. We're going to get these others. But I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. And this has happened to me with several times with the commissioners. Well, you don't have any proof. So I get the proof. I spent the time getting the proof. I walk in and I say, here's the proof. Oh, so? They handle it with 2 letters and a word. So I
Yeah.
bring in the proof about Simon Hare, and he cuts the power off, saying, oh, that's disruptive. To tell the truth is disruptive? Look, we got to go with the truth. You may not like it. I don't like it. This challenges my perceptions, too.
Let's look at something here for a minute, because I believe that Gil Gilbertson was elected in 2008. Okay,
all right,
and then he was reelected in 2012, and he served until here just recently. Okay, so he did 2 terms in there.
It may have been a little different than that, because you would think it would go in 4-year increments. But okay, go ahead.
Well, that's what I mean. It was 2008 to 2012. That's 4 years.
Yeah, but then he would be over in 2016, and he's out already. So something's a little off there. But okay.
No, it may have been 2006.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, in any event, it was in the early part of his service as our sheriff that this took place.
Yes.
Now, he quite often says that in the early part of his service as a sheriff, there was 100 deputies. 100. So, I mean, that jail, and at the same time, things are crazy.
Yeah.
It's out of control. The crime's out of control. I don't know what to do. Well, the numbers don't show that at all. I don't know what this guy was doing. Maybe people around him were just saying, oh, my God, we have less money than ever before. And I think that's what it is that always has been a constant in this county from way back. Federal money by the boatload had been coming in here, and they just dump it right on your desk. Here's $10 million. Here you go. Well, we don't have anything like that anymore.
Well,
nothing like that.
And crime has to be going up. Of course, it has to be going up. Well, wait a minute now. Just hold on. Before I came to that conclusion too. Just before we go ahead and accept all that at face value, doesn't mean that you have to doubt everything, but it's probably a good idea to at least look and ask a couple of questions. Is it really true that crime is going up? And the example that we were given by the chief and by the sheriff were, well, if you had had your car broken into, then maybe you would know that crime is going up. Now, hold on a second. I haven't had my car broken into. Does that mean crime's going down? I mean, isn't my perception just as good as yours?
No, that whole argument is so stupid. I listen. I'm sorry, guys. If you're watching this show, that's a dumb argument. Please come up with something better than that, because that's really, really dumb. It reminds me of, who is that guy? They played him over and over and over. They even made a songify the news. You are so dumb, for real. No, I mean that is a dumb argument. You are not dumb. That is a dumb argument. So please stop making that argument. No, perceived crime. You're never going to see a statistic for perceived crime, because you could do listen, they're trying to manipulate your thoughts on the economy right now.
They are.
Tell you the economy's wonderful. It's recovering. Everything's wonderful. Oh, yeah? Okay. Fantastic. And I guess some people buy into that, but the numbers, they even fudge the numbers too, so we can't really get into that. But the bottom line on this situation is that he did that back when he had a lot of deputies, a lot more staffing than he does now. He thought there was a crisis situation.
He did.
And he wanted to spend 4 years of funding in 3 years. Well, I bet you the sheriff right now would love to have one of those years of funding in the way that it was then. So in any event, I I think it's a sham. I think they've even bought into some of this perception garbage. You know, I mean, clearly, Gil Gilbertson bought into the perception thing, because even back then, when there was more money coming in than there is now, you know, he was freaking out and wanting to spend.
All we're asking you to do as an audience is to think about whether things make any sense or not. And I'm guilty of this as well, and that I have partially bought into this thing, and I'm being pulled into this rather reluctantly. But it's hard to argue with actual facts. I mean, if they want to argue that there's perceived crime, then let's give them perceived money. You know, you want 3 times as much money? Well, we're going to give you perceptual money, and then you'll feel like you've got a lot of money. I mean,
I can print some of that right now.
We can make a joke out of it if you like, but here's the thing. Gil Gilbertson,
oh, that'd be funny.
He fell into this so hard that when he got numbers put in front of him, that's what he says, they were brought to him, that there's 9% of the homes have been broken into. That's a lot. Let's just say 10. It's a little, that one home out of 10 has been broken into. Things taken out of it, okay? That he had a press conference and put out a press release saying that this was the case. Now, when we first saw this, it was after the press conference, because of course we're not invited. I said, that can't be right. Oh, you don't know? Hey, what? That can't be right. That's just counterintuitive. Well, it turns out we were 100% right. He was 100% wrong. It was all a lie. Now, even if you say, well, it's not Gil Gilbertson's fault, he was lied to. He had the people who had backed this idea, they have not enough intelligence to say, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right somehow. Something's not right, but that's our perception. Well, that's where perception takes you, bud.
Well, yeah, but you know what, though? He has access to the numbers. See, we have to wait on the 2013, 2014 numbers. They don't. They have them right now.
So why don't they tell us what they say?
Because they don't say what they want them to say. That's why.